Did you know Spike Lee's film Highest to Lowest is based on a Japanese film from 1963 directed by Akira Kurosawa? Well, I did. 18 years after their last collaboration, Spike Lee and Denzel Washington have teamed up again for this Kurosawa remake. And there is no better place to talk about high and low in than Yokohama, where the original film takes place. The second largest city in Japan, it started off as a small fishing village in Tokyo Bay before Commodore Perry came in his black ships to demand the opening of several ports, including this one, to commerce. I covered high and low extensively in my Noirs of Akira Kurosawa video, which you should definitely check out, but High and Low is an onion of a film. Every new viewing reveals another layer of the film that you missed, and I by no means covered every single possible interpretation. I'm going to summarize and analyze the movie while trying not to be redundant. In his hilltop mansion overlooking the city of Yokohama, National Shoes executive Kingo Gondo is plotting a leveraged buyout of the company he's worked at for over 30 years. Suddenly, the phone rings. Someone has kidnapped his son Jun and is demanding 30 million yen for his safe return. But that can't be right. Jun's right here. Well, the kidnapper actually took Shinichi, the chauffeur's son that was playing with Jun that afternoon. Gondo, who was about to do anything to get his son back, struggles on whether to pay. If he doesn't, Shinichi will die, but if he does, he'll be kicked out of the company, saddled with immense debt, and lose his house. After agonizing over the decision, he finally decides to pay. The police discover the culprit to be a medical intern named Ginjiro Takeuchi, who is also responsible for the murder of his accomplices. After being found guilty and sentenced to death, he requests Gondo meet him in prison. Before we go any further, I think it's important to discuss the original title in Japanese, Tengoku to Jigoku, or Heaven and Hell. Now, this is not a religious movie. There's actually no Buddhist or Shinto imagery used throughout, but the title reflects the positioning of the characters in a metaphorical paradise and hell created by income inequality. The rich, like Gondo, get to live in climate-controlled and luxurious mansions, while the poor, people like Takeuchi, have to swelter in the slums. The police, who are more middle class, have small comforts, like fans to escape the heat and maneuver between Gondo's heavenly mansion and the drug dens of Yokohama with ease. The camera projects this dichotomy. In the first scene, there is a strong attention to order. 3 cameras were used, 2 on dollies and 1 hidden in the hallway. Close-ups were taken via long-distance lenses so as not to enter the set and disturb the actors. This projects the heavenly atmosphere, white, clean, orderly, in contrast with the train scene that uses handheld cameras. Some are even bolted to the floor so that they can jump with the train. When we're in Takeuchi's apartment, he is shot from below. I think they changed the name of the title because in the West, it's really difficult to imagine heaven and hell without using the Judeo-Christian tradition as a frame of reference. We'll see this in the 2025 version. 1963 was an interesting year to talk about income inequality, to say the least. Just 18 years prior, Japan was crawling out of the rubble after its disastrous defeat in World War II. To make a long story short, most of the cities in Japan were destroyed, there wasn't enough food to go around, and millions of people were left homeless after the American bombings. If you would like to learn more about that, I highly recommend reading Embracing Defeat. By the 1960s, Japan had become a major economic power and newly rich country. Let's just say even Takeuchi appears to have a higher standard of living than most people shortly after the war. But Kurosawa is saying that's not good enough. Yes, the standard of living has increased dramatically and we now have a nouveau rich, but there is still an underclass of people who have not been taken care of by the system. When looking out the window, we can't even see the slum, only the port and its seemingly endless economic opportunities. But from Takeuchi's perspective, Gondo's shadow looms over his apartment, mocking him with his wealth. Even the hot police officer, played by Isao Kimura, notes, "The house gets on your nerves." The poor can see the rich clearly. After all, they love to flaunt their wealth. But to Gondo, they might as well be ants. He's not worried about how he's going to eat tomorrow or how hot it will be outside. He's got a hostile takeover on Monday. He's worried about getting richer and more powerful. Only when the poor directly inconvenience their lives do they take note. High and Low is a technologically ambitious film. 2 living room sets were used, one on location in Yokohama, like me, and another in Toho Studios. The one at Toho included a miniature replica of Yokohama with little city lights and all. The real city lights didn't photograph well. Although Gondo is praised by the press and society at large, his rivals and creditors take this as an opportunity to strike. He is fired from National Shoes and his assets are seized. In the game of capitalism, there is no room for humanity. Gondo comes to understand this. After all, when his old secretary who betrayed him comes back to offer him his old job back following the bad press from his firing, Gondo refuses. With his position and fortune gone, all he has left is his humanity, which has become much more precious to him. He will no longer work with people who have sold their souls. The film has a dual structure. The first half in the mansion and on the train, interrogating Gondo's internal struggle, while the second half focuses on finding the kidnapper. The presentation is also very different. We move from meticulously blocked scenes in the mansion, dominated by long takes, to a police procedural spreading the characters across Yokohama and other parts of Kanagawa Prefecture. They go near Enoshima Island, which is pretty down south. The film structure represents the duality between heaven and hell. Gondo's mansion represents heaven, where he lives like a god, while below him, the slums, represents hell, where demons like Takeuchi lie in wait. But the binary between these two places frequently cracks. Though the mansion is luxurious, as the aftermath of the kidnapping plays out, it becomes a living hell for the characters. The police, who are more middle class, live in a purgatory with a few amenities like electric fans and cars, and can more freely navigate between the two other realms. Also, Gondo and Takeuchi do end up meeting by accident on the street. The young man recognizes him, but the other doesn't. Perhaps this shows how far Gondo has fallen. He's now in the kidnapper's neck of the woods. Though they're from different worlds, their lives conveniently collide. Yokohama itself became a place of duality. As the port was opened by the Americans, it became a hub for merchants from all over the world to sell their wares. Many Europeans lived in Yokohama, enjoyed extraterritoriality, meaning they could follow different laws from the locals. But what else would you expect from colonizers? It became one of the first places to transfer Western ideas into Japan. Thus, there are many European-style buildings. One of the most famous are the red brick warehouses. Built during the Meiji era, these warehouses functioned as cargo storage facilities for the port until 1989. After a long period of renovation, they reopened in 2002 as a tourist site. Inside, you can now enjoy restaurants, shops, and event spaces. In its center courtyard, many special events are held, most famously a Christmas market. So, did you have fun at the Christmas market last time you were here?
No. Last time I was here with this woman, and she wanted to come at the peak time that everybody was freaking here, and we waited in line for like literally 2 hours. I was not well enough dressed. I actually caught a cold that night, and then once we got inside, I realized, oh, it's this tiny little thing where we just pay for like overpriced food, and I was like,
you pay money to
I could have went to Size India if I wanted to eat some food, you know what I mean?
Yokohama's history as an international port is reflected in the bar scene, where we see many sailors and foreigners partying shoulder to shoulder with Japanese clientele. Like Dante's Inferno, there seems to be different levels of hell. The bar is fun, yet debauched. After all, they're doing drug deals. Takeuchi's place sucks, but it's nothing compared to the drug den, where lost souls seem to wait around in a daze, willing to do anything for another hit. Though Takeuchi is here to test a fatal dose of heroin on an innocent woman, it reflects his own moral degradation. How he is willing to go to the deepest depths of hell to get what he wants. In the final scene, Gondo seems to go to a hell of sorts, visiting Takeuchi in prison. Gondo explains he works for a new company and is trying to rival National Shoes, but it is unlikely he will achieve the same success. Takeuchi mocks Gondo, but he's not baited. Hating this young man isn't going to get him back his house, his job, or pay off his debt. He seems to feel sorry for this young man who came from a similar background as he did, who threw his life away because the system chipped away at his soul. The police may have caught the kidnapper, but it seems there's no real justice because the economic and political system that mentally destroyed Takeuchi and forced Gondo to financial ruin is still standing. At the end of this scene, Takeuchi says he's more afraid of going to heaven than hell, then starts screaming, suggesting the thought of salvation crept in. He has identified himself as a being of hell. His impoverished surroundings have morally corrupted him to the point where he feels incapable of being good. Yet seeing how Gondo is willing to forgive him, or at least sympathize with his plight, maybe he is worthy of redemption. And if he is not an irredeemable demon, then who is he? A lost soul? A victim of an unjust system? If he was capable of good this entire time, was all of this for nothing? The act of seeing is a popular motif throughout. According to Donald Ritchie, the references to seeing in the film are many and varied. The kidnapper can see into Gondo's house. The policemen, in turn, use binoculars to peep out. Many in the cast wear glasses. The kidnapper wears dark glasses at night, and their surface reflects what he sees. Devices for seeing, still pictures, motion pictures, drawings are constantly used. There are many mirrors in the picture. The wall mirror in the Yokohama dive, rear view mirrors in cars. There are all kinds of reflections, from reflections on water to reflections on the shiny surfaces of automobiles. A kind of paranoia is felt. Someone is always watching. It's night now, deal with it. If Takeuchi's life had just been a little easier, none of this would have happened. Although we don't get a proper backstory, it can be assumed that somebody who comes from a slum doesn't have it easy. Gondo's home became an embodiment of the injustice of his circumstances. Although Takeuchi kidnapped and killed, he is not the villain of this story. It's society. A society that allowed people like Gondo to build mansions overlooking slums. Although this is one of Kurosawa's finest films, it's by no means one of his most popular ones. It's just really difficult to compete with his samurai pictures, although I do imagine a rediscovery coming up in the future as its message is so poignant today. In the end, Gondo is distinguished by his integrity. The film is asking us if the son of a businessman is equal to that of the son of a chauffeur. Kurosawa is saying yes, we have a responsibility to our fellow man and to our communities. And that is also the main theme of Lee's 2025 adaptation. I don't know why this is here. For some reason, there are a bunch of replicas of foreign monuments in Japan. In the year that I've lived here, I've seen the Eiffel Tower near Mount Fuji, the Little Mermaid in Osaka, and this. Atop a Brooklyn penthouse, music mogul David King is about to secure a buyout of his record company, Stackin' Hits Records, having previously sold his majority stake a few years ago. Before he can secure the deal, a kidnapper accidentally kidnaps his godson, Kyle, mistaking him for David's son, Trey. David must now decide whether he'll pay the ransom or move forward with the deal. Sound familiar? I can see why Lee built it as a reinterpretation. Though it has the bones of the original film, it goes in a completely different direction. Lee clearly reveals himself to be a fan of the original. Though the remake is homage to the English language title, he's clearly aware of the original title. There are a lot of religious references throughout. As this is an American reinterpretation, Lee references religious traditions that Americans would be more familiar with. The protagonist's name, David King, is reminiscent of King David from the Bible. Trey talks about having followers, and David mocks him, asking if he has a scripture. Archie's studio is at 333 Trinity Street, the scene of Paul praying, intercut with an overshot of Kyle in the kidnapper's lair, symbolizing God looking after his son. Kyle is literally David's godson, and a lot of crosses throughout. Unfortunately, the religious symbolism of this film doesn't hit as hard because the original movie's main theme, income inequality, is watered down. It's still there. The juxtaposition between David and Archie's homes, the cops treat David with way more respect than Christopher. They fawn over Trey, who, yes, would be shaken after his best friend was kidnapped, but they literally grill Kyle as he's lying in a hospital bed, barely conscious, probably because they think his life is worth less than $17.3 million. Yet the main focus of the film is David's journey to becoming what I guess you could call an ethical capitalist, rather than the injustices of income inequality. We'll talk about this more in depth when we get to The Kidnapper. The most obvious change is the location. While a lot of depictions of NYC show rich transplants skipping around Fifth Avenue in designer clothes, Lee shows us the diversity of the city. Wright plays a Muslim character, presumably a convert. The ransom takes place during the Puerto Rican Day Parade. We start at a Brooklyn penthouse and end up in the Bronx. When naming stations, we get various shots of the different art styles of each one. Lee is clearly interested in depicting New York as a rich tapestry of multiple cultures rather than the playground for the 1%. I think this film complicates the buyout elements from the original. Honestly, I do sometimes struggle to understand Gondo's buyout scheme, but in a nutshell, I understand that he mortgaged everything he owned to take out a loan to buy a majority stake in National Shoes. If he pays the ransom, he will be unable to move forward with his plan and lose all his assets, including the house. In Highest to Lowest, David built Stack and Hits Records and sold his controlling stock a few years prior. Now, a private equity firm, I think, called Stray Dog, a reference to another Kurosawa noir. I really like this detail because Stray Dog is thematically very similar to High and Low, and this private equity firm wants to buy it, and he wants to commit a leveraged buyout to stop the purchase. I think Lee did this to make Stack and Hits Records more like David's baby than just a regular company. This makes sense as art is typically more emotional than shoes. But it's still not really clear where David got all of this money from. In one scene, his wife says $17.3 million is practically all they have, but then apparently he did have a few $1,000,000 lying around for the buyout. This maybe explains why he doesn't act all that concerned at first, but of course he still has to pay that back, right? He acts shocked that his creditors are mad, which... why? Also, why did these people give you this money? Was this an investment or a loan? Are you putting your family into debt just to get your record company back and then not being fully transparent with your wife? Again, I've seen this movie twice and I'm still very confused by this. The new film builds up to the reveal that the chauffeur's son was kidnapped by mistake, whereas in the original, we find out almost immediately. Honestly, I think this is one of the weaker changes. The fact that Kyle was introduced and is seemingly forgotten by everyone except his dad makes it obvious where this is going. In the original, 30 minutes, or 20% of the film's runtime, is dedicated to Gondo wrestling with his final decision. We waste time trying to trick the audience when what was needed was more time watching David wrestle with the final decision. In the OG, Mifune gives one of the best performances of his illustrious career. He agonizes over having to pay the ransom, throwing away 30 years of hard work for a kid that's not even his. Mifune came from a working class background and never really shook off this rough exterior, though according to interviews, he was a very shy and humble man. His aura projects a man who has climbed to the top through hard work and savvy business strategy, but who also remembers where he started. In one scene, he asks his wife to find his tool belt and fixes up a bag, a skill he learned from his factory days. We see in the beginning of the film he's willing to ruin the other executives for his buyout, but he also has a level of integrity they lack. He doesn't want to make shoddy shoes, prioritizing his craft over short-term profits. He is the exact type of person who would struggle with a decision like this. Right after he's paid the ransom, he has to wash his face to calm down. Later, when the police visit his house, he's mowing the lawn in a daze, sweating profusely. By the final scene, he's tired, standing by his decision but clearly weighed down by it. David agonizes with the decision for a few hours, but the rest of the movie, he doesn't really act like someone whose entire life and legacy is on the line. We go from him begging for advice from photos of Aretha Franklin and Jimi Hendrix to him joking around before delivering $17.3 million ransom. Again, if he doesn't think this will ruin him financially, it will at least prevent him from buying back Stack & Hits, which has been his main priority until the kidnapping. Later, when he and Paul go hunt down the killer, he's shadowboxing in the car to The Payback by James Brown. Great song choice, but the context of this is, if he doesn't get the money in time, he will lose his job, his house, everything. And he could die. This isn't about Denzel's performance, which I'll talk about in a bit, but that the character is not always acting with the seriousness that the situation entails. I think that Lee directed Washington this way because the film has a lighter tone than the original. In the new movie, we see David having conversations with the cops, his wife, Trey, and Christopher, all in separate rooms. Now look, I don't think Lee should have just reenacted the original scene verbatim, but I can't help but feel he isolates his characters in this segment, unable to converse all together and be influenced by the multitude of perspectives. And for a film about the importance of community, I think that's kind of weird. There are still good scenes where David struggles with his decision, like when he talks to his son, he says, "Everything I do for our family." Okay, then why didn't you watch him ball? And where's this even coming from? You using the money to buy your record company back doesn't help your family, it just takes up more of your time. It's clear that this is just him coping, using his "I don't want my family to be financially affected by this" as an excuse when they're actually much more open to the idea of helping Kyle than he is. In the first act, David presents himself as a stand-up family man, but his dedication to Stack & Hits may actually mean more to him than his family and even Kyle's life. The film repeats the line, "Not all money is good money," which directly connects to the themes of the original film. Kurosawa's movie focused on man's responsibility to their fellow man, regardless of class. Though Kyle's father is in a completely different tax bracket than Trey's, their families share a communal bond. Remember, David is his godfather. They are a part of the same community. The well-being of the community comes before personal success. The film also updates the chauffeurs. In the OG, Aoki is just Gondo's employee who happens to have a son of the same age. In 2025, David hired his old friend who spent some time in prison. This raises the stakes. This kid is practically family. If he doesn't pay, a decades-long friendship is not only over, but what is his community going to think? Press coverage was part of the original movie too, but in 2025, social media and public opinion are much faster and on a grander scale. While in 1963, the press doesn't get a whiff of the kidnapper's plot until days after the ransom's been paid, Trey's kidnapping is breaking news the afternoon it presumably happens. The case is all over social media, and that same day, David is getting roasted for vacillating on paying, and there's a full-fledged conspiracy theory that's developed not 24 hours later. I think this is probably the most realistic aspect of this update. Where I think Kurosawa was using the press as more of a plot device, Lee is making commentary on attention as social currency. To keep the focus on David's journey, he is the one who hunts down the kidnapper, not the cops. He finds the kidnapper, not them. He brings him to justice, not them. I've seen a lot of criticism of this being unrealistic, but I don't think this film is going for realism anyway. I think Lee was going for crime thriller rather than police procedural. Plus, not only has our culture turned against cops, but their role in this interpretation is much smaller. One change I really like is that his wife isn't happy about him committing a leverage buyout behind her back. Like, Reiko just sits there as this man describes how he took out a second mortgage on their house. I would have slapped him. The weakest change in this adaptation, in my opinion, is the characterization of the kidnapper. In this version, he is a down-on-his-luck, up-and-coming rapper named Young Felon, aka Archie. His character can best be described as inconsistent. At first, there is a lot of buildup. Who could this criminal mastermind be? But once we meet him, he comes off as a childish, immature brat. In the original, Takeuchi is whip smart because, hey, you have to be to steal 30 million yen. It took the entire Yokohama police department and a good portion of the media just to prove his guilt. Young Felon, by contrast, gets caught by David, a literal civilian, upon their first meeting. By the end of the movie, he even has the audacity to suggest that they team up for a record deal and leverage his newfound infamy to sell records. Never once thinking, gee, maybe the guy who I robbed and almost killed wouldn't want to interact with me on a daily basis. Also, I'm not sure if they'd allow him to record music in prison. Young Felon says he looks just like David, calling back to the similarities between Takeuchi and Gondo. Like Takeuchi and Gondo, Young Felon and David are separated by choice, not necessarily circumstance. David comes from the same borough as Archie and climbed his way up through the music industry, and Archie is undeniably very talented. Even David was rocking out to his music on the Brooklyn Bridge. Like Takeuchi, given a little more time and making better choices, he could have risen to the same heights as David. I do think taking a step back from the income inequality theme of the original removes the impact of Archie's character. The shadows of the original are still there. He's clearly broke and lives in a bad neighborhood, but the movie doesn't really try to develop sympathy for him. Yes, he has a beautiful wife and child, but it's alluded that he treats them terribly. He complains about David turning his back on his community, but he's really just mad that he didn't get a record deal. He doesn't feel a sense of injustice like Takeuchi. He just feels entitled to David's success. By contrast, I don't think Takeuchi wanted to rise to Gondo's level, but bring Gondo down to his. Archie says he's got mouths to feed and isn't trying to go back to prison. Okay, so why are you kidnapping people and stealing millions of dollars? Especially when you can't even take down a guy in his 70s. How is someone this stupid able to come up with such a masterful plan? Now, I, more than anyone, know how it feels to not see a lot of material success after putting a lot of hard work and effort into your art. As of the filming of this video, I only have 258 subscribers. Please like and subscribe. I have a P-chan to support. He drinks so much.
Hey, I only drink on weekends. Come on. Come on. Time. Oh, almost didn't make it that time, damn.
But the fact that Young Felon feels entitled to success in a way that Takeuchi did not makes him difficult to sympathize with. In fact, if he had just waited one more week, he probably would have finally been discovered by David, as his song was on his listen to list and he was clearly jamming to it. The music booth scene is obviously a callback to the prison meeting. While Yamazaki, practically a newbie actor, could hold his own against Toshiro Mifune, well, I like to think ASAP wasn't given good enough material to really shine. It feels like Denzel is competing with Denzel from previous scenes rather than ASAP. Like in the original, Young Felon requests to see David in prison. Unlike the OG, David doesn't feel sympathy for the kidnapper because without the theme of inequality and his brazen arrogance and stupidity, there's nothing to sympathize with. Which is weird because Lee's most famous picture, Do the Right Thing, is about systemic racism keeping the black community down and how the disenfranchisement of marginalized people leads to violence.
Black and brown people are still being murdered today by police forces across the United States of America, and the people who inflict this death walk free. Don't get fired, don't get suspended.
You'd think he'd want to talk about this or explore what makes someone from Young Felon's background commit such a crime. I think these problems are rooted in changing the film's ending. We can't be happy that David won and sad that Young Felon is going to prison. Those are just too contradictory. So Young Felon's character got flattened out to give David a clean, happy ending. The score is awful. There were a lot of scenes that needed suspenseful music, but the score just made them feel flat. It honestly sounds like music you'd put to images of mountain ranges rather than a ransom drop-off or chase scene. On a lighter note, this transition scared the crap out of me. Kurosawa did a lot of wipes, including in high and low, so this was probably homage. As previously stated, Mifune is the star, but all of the supporting actors are doing heavy lifting. His role also significantly declines in the second half of the film when the focus shifts to the police hunting down the killer. As the first Lee and Washington collab in 18 years, I had very high expectations for Denzel's performance, and he exceeded them. He seems to slip into character like a hand slips into a glove. He can seamlessly move from a comedic performance to delivering dead serious dialogue to rapping at ASAP Rocky without skipping a beat. This is his show, which in a way I found a bit disappointing. Most of Kurosawa's movies tended to have ensemble casts. Though Mifune gives one of his best performances, the supporting cast is also given room to shine. Kagawa is equally conflicted and complex. Nakadai is channeling Henry Fonda with a restrained determination to catch the kidnapper. And yes, Nakadai recently passed away, and no, I'm not okay. Tsutomu Yamazaki had only been in a few pictures before playing the cool and collected kidnapper. He would go on to star in a few Juzo Itami films, most famously Tampopo. Isao Kimura had worked with Kurosawa before, playing the young samurai in Seven Samurai. Even Takashi Shimura has a cameo as the chief of the investigation section. In hindsight, this was a legendary cast, so I can't help but feel disappointed that the supporting characters in the reinterpretation didn't get as much depth. Hadera is playing the wife. Wright gives a very good performance. The prayer scene in particular is moving, but he's never given anything that takes the attention away from David. Aubrey Joseph plays David's son who wants to follow in his father's footsteps, but we don't get much more than that. The cops are cops. The guy from the Allstate commercials was particularly annoying. And ASAP? Well, again, I think if he was given better material, he could have done better. Yokohama so far. Okay, so the biggest difference from the original is its ending. David is able to get the ransom back in time and pay off his debts. He gets to keep his penthouse, and although he's not kicked out of Stackin' Hits, he does leave to start a smaller label so he can be more hands-on with the artists. I'm not really bothered by this change because I think Lee was building to it. Although I love the theme of income inequality in High and Low, I do understand that the new movie is not about a man who loses it all because he dared to defy the rules of capitalism, but about a man who is reevaluating his values after a lifetime of success. It asks the question, how do people in positions of power pay it forward? I watched this interview at Cannes where Jeffrey Wright talks about it's not about what you can do for yourself, but what you can do for your community, and I think that's the ethos of this film. With ruthless businessmen trying to squeeze as much money as possible out of the music industry and AI trying to replace artists, there've just gotta be some people on the front lines protecting art. Who you support matters. So, which artists do you choose to cultivate? The rapper with notable talent who has a huge following and whose problems you can exploit for publicity down the road, or the talented singer with little to no following yet can be molded into a great artist with time and patience? I think it's clear that Young Thug had talent, but he wasn't going to be dependable or behave well enough to really make art long term. David has to come to a decision. It's not about his personal success, but what he can do for his community. I think this is a calling that speaks directly to Lee, who is also a producer of many films by up-and-coming Black directors. The final prison scene is clearly reminiscent of the original film, though since we already got the recording booth scene, this homage feels a little overdone. I think the point of this scene is to show how similar the two are as we see them slowly come closer. During this conversation, it becomes clear that David sincerely cares about the music, while Young Thug only cares about making money and being famous. Though Young Thug came from the same neighborhood as David, he has one thing the young rapper doesn't: integrity. This scene plays very differently from the original. The older man repudiates the younger, and we are meant to feel contempt when he's taken away, not sympathy. I think the impact of Gondo's decision hits more because he actually has to sacrifice something. He loses his house, his job, and is presumably saddled with debt forever. David, by contrast, gets a new lease on life. He becomes closer with his family, his clients, and although it is assumed that he will be making less money with his new company, I don't think he'll be missing that skyline anytime soon. If anything, David is rewarded for his integrity, gaining a closer relationship with his family, clients, and a new lease on life. I've seen some criticism of the final scene being too long, but I think it's critical to David's story arc. Throughout the film, he was too busy to really give artists the time and attention they needed. He doesn't have time to listen to the new artist his Nepo baby's son picked out. He could only listen to one singer in the lobby for 60 seconds. We don't see him with any artists as he's too busy trying to buy back the company, and Young Thug was practically stalking him and he didn't even notice. He was too caught up in the business side of things to really focus on the music or his family. So the final scene of him listening to a song in its entirety with his family shows his priorities have shifted over the course of the film. So, which one do I prefer? Well, I think it's better to look at them as companion pieces. Highest to Lowest is not better than the original film, but honestly, I didn't go in thinking it would be. I was really just curious to see what Lee was going to do with the material. Though I don't support every creative decision made, I thought the film made compelling commentary about the importance of supporting art, giving back to your community, and the conflict between professional success and being a good person. I saw the film twice, and I found it very enjoyable both times. I've also noticed an uptick in interest in High and Low, and I support anything that gets more people to watch that movie. Well, I think that's it. If you made it this far, thank you. Please like and subscribe. Mata ne!